What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary, and I'm here with my beautiful wife. Say hi, boo.
Hi everyone, I'm AKDI and I'm from Turkey.
Let's go, let's go. So this is episode 39 of Simon and Acting Movie Reviews, done live on X. So yeah, come in and join the conversation if you're listening to this on Spotify, on Cinema Crossroads, or join the conversation if you're listening to this on YouTube, on my channel, Simon Hill Keeps It Trail. We cover all different types of movies, dramas, comedies, all nationalities. And for today, we are diving headfirst into China, and we're doing our first Chinese movie, and it's called A Touch of Sin. It's a 2013 like drama, thriller, action, murder film. I don't know what genre you would describe this film. How would you describe this film, Acting?
Maybe like a drama thriller.
Drama thriller?
I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Drama
Okay.
action-ish.
Drama action-ish. A little bit. There's a lot that goes on in this film, but this is a 2013 film. As I mentioned, it was directed by a director whose name is Jia Zhangqi, and it stars many Chinese actors: Jiang Wu, Wang Baqiong, and Zhao Tao. I hope I'm pronouncing that right for any Chinese listeners. All due respect is meant. But I really, really enjoyed this film, and we haven't done a movie review in a few days. And so I've been watching this film over and over again, trying to make sure I got the plot in my mind, things I remember in my mind, themes in my mind. And I have to say, every time I watch this film, I pick up something new, and I start to like it even more. But how did you feel after watching this film, Acting?
I liked it. Like overall, when we finished it, I was like, okay, like this is interesting. You know, there are 4 stories here. One of the stories, the one with the killer guy, that was sort of like I was like, okay, like I couldn't really make sense of this one that much, or maybe it didn't fit with the others in my head. But overall, it was like a interesting movie that makes you think. So it made me think.
Right, right. When you say killer guy, I don't know exactly who you mean because there's everybody's a killer in this movie.
Yeah, the serial killer one.
Okay, the serial killer. Okay, all right, interesting. Well, yeah, basically, this film is not about, well, it's about many different things, and it's hard to describe exactly what this film is about, but essentially, it's 4 different stories in a 2 hour long movie that takes place in many different cities, regions, and of China, and amongst different social classes of people in China. Though generally all of them are like the poor and downtrodden. And basically, it's about violence. What type of violence happens, and there's blatant murder, there's political violence, there's retributive violence, there's suicide. There's so many different types of violence that happens in this film, and it makes you really think. And the reason why I like this film so much is because it reminded me of my home. Like I said, I'm from Louisiana. Louisiana is one of the murder capitals of America. Gun violence plagues our society. Every day you turn on the news, you hear about somebody getting shot or killed by gun violence. And seeing this take place in China, it allowed me to, how can I say this, like project onto a different society how the same issue is there and how they deal with it or how they view it and how different the things that cause violence are, but also how so many of them are the same. That's why I was feeling the movie so much. But what did you think?
Yeah, I think like when I watched the movie, I did get a sense of like, okay, there is a lot of critique of capitalism and like how our lives are based on like consumerism, and these people, mostly like lower to middle class people, are just surviving. And I feel like there's a lot of critique of that.
Yeah.
And the killings and all the violence that was in this movie was sort of like, when people are that's in those situations, in those conditions, sometimes violence is the only way, and they use that. So that's what I felt like, sort of like the message I got from this movie was like that critique of modern dog eat dog world.
Right. I sort of kind of disagree with the idea that this movie is kind of saying that violence is the only way. I think there are many different types of violence that happens, and some of them seem like the only way, but then other times you're like the character could have had a different option, or the violence was inevitable to happen, or the violence was accidental. Go ahead.
Yeah, like, I'm not saying like the movie says it's the only option. Maybe that was like wrong, but it's just like showing us how it gets there.
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit. Not that it's saying like it's the only option.
Yeah, yeah. Another reason why I like this movie, and we're about to get into the plot very soon for anybody listening, is that it shows you a different side of China. Because like the first time I watched this movie, and they're going to all these rural parts of China, these very hood, ghetto, like dingy parts of China, I'm like, this is not the China we see on TV. This is not the mega skyscrapers and like the crazy rich Asians. Like this is real. This is real trappish. Like this is the trenches of China, and that was interesting to see all these different faces of the working class and the poor people of China. And I just really liked, this other side of China that they show in this film. But did you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I think I really like the touch of culture in this movie. And yeah, like there were some scenes where we saw traditional Chinese, like almost like theater plays, right? Like for the rural people, basically.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like there were different elements of China there, and I felt like it was in that sense kind of like introduced China to you in a very deep way. But
Hmm.
and also like if you watch this and make some like do some research later on, you understand even more about China, which was
Yeah.
also nice to experience.
Yeah, yeah. This movie has a lot of deep cultural references to like Chinese mythology and their plays and their ancient stories and stuff like that. So as Westerners or people not from China, like we're watching this movie from the outside, and maybe a Chinese person might watch this and get an even deeper understanding from it. But I still think we can appreciate this film for what it is and the stories that it tells, because even if you don't know all of that, you can still take away something from this, I would say.
Definitely, like it has international like themes, but
Hmm.
it does also probably have like a Chinese theme as well, like, or like you said, there are things that only Chinese people would understand maybe here
Hmm.
because of the myths and stuff,
Hmm.
but there's definitely something that everybody can pick up.
Yeah, yeah. Now, before we get into the plot, one more thing I want to say is that though I really like this movie, and I do think that this film was deserving of all the praise that it got when it was released, because it dropped in 2013 and it was nominated for the Palme d'Or, meaning the best film of 2013. So this could have got the Oscar of one of the highest levels of cinematic achievement, but it didn't win. But it did win best screenplay. So professional film critics love this film, and I like it too. But the only thing I have a critique of this movie is that it can be a bit slow. Like there are parts in the film when one character says a line of dialogue to another character, and I swear to God, the wait time between the response feels like an eternity. Like somebody's like, "We should leave Dongguan. Like we should leave this city." Then the other person just sits there, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait for them to reply, and they just say no. Like that was not necessary. But what did you have any complaints about it?
I think my only complaint was that there was no music.
Mm,
And this is like a common theme of things that I don't like in movies when they don't have any music, because it sort of makes it, I don't know, it makes me feel like I'm just watching like a recording
mm-hmm,
from like a videotape or something. And I know, like, yes, by not adding any music to this movie, it's made it more realistic. And
mm-hmm,
I can appreciate that. I think, but also it just makes a little bit of it takes a little bit of the magic away for me,
mm-hmm,
because there could have been really dope, like, I don't know, Chinese music in this movie.
mm.
And I feel like maybe like you said, maybe in those long pauses and stuff like that, if we had something going on in the back, we could have appreciated or endured it better.
Yeah, yeah. So your thing that you hate about movies is a movie with no music, and my thing is I hate when people show text messages on screen on the phone. So we both have our pet peeves.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I don't hate it, because some movies can like handle that, and I feel like this movie handled it like 60% without the music. But it would just be, for me, it would just be much better if we had like some traditional Chinese music on the back, and I was thinking about that all the time.
Yeah, but possibly maybe they don't add music in certain films because they don't want to force you to feel a certain way. They want you to get the feeling yourself. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, in this movie, by not choosing to put music, it made it more realistic. Like you were watching like a really real life event happening.
Hmm.
So I can appreciate like that part, but I don't know, still.
Yeah, speaking of real life, the movie is very realistic, and this is like a very, you feel like these stories actually happened, even though these are fictionalized stories that are based on real stories. You feel like you're watching a reenactment of something that actually happened.
Yeah.
So let's get into the plot real quick. I'm going to be reading from Wikipedia loosely, like the plot line for each of the stories, and then we'll break them down. So the beginning of the movie opens with some guy on a motorcycle, dressed in all black with a Chicago Bulls beanie on. He's riding on his motorcycle in some mountainous, deserted region of China, and then like three guys come out of nowhere, block his motorcycle, and they say, "Hey, you got some money for us?" And so the guy pulls out his gun and kills two of the guys who are in front of him. But the guy that's behind him, behind his bike, he starts running away. But this guy starts shooting at the guy as he's running away, runs him down on the bike, and then shoots him in the back, and that's how the film opens. Also, there's like another character who's on his motorcycle next to a truck that turned over, and the truck that turned over was full of, I believe, apples, either apples or tomatoes. What fruit do you think it was?
It was apples, no?
It was apples. Okay, well, let's run with apples, right? So he's eating the apples, and it looks like the people that turned over in the car, they either got shot or there was an accident or something. So maybe those robbers robbed that guy too and shot him, something like that, right? And then when one of the guys who's on the bike tries to take a bite from the apple, the truck like explodes. What did you think of like the opening of the film?
I mean, when I first saw it, I felt like, okay, this is going to be like an action movie. Like maybe it's going to be like a chase. Like this guy's the main guy, and I guess he's like a gangster or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I felt like it was going to be like a crime action movie, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, by the way, I thought this was interesting. When I watched like this video, I forgot the name, on YouTube about this movie, and this guy said that also this movie critiques a lot of like Western media,
Mm-hmm.
because like in Western media, for example, like Chinese or Asian people in general are shown like a lot of doing like karates and stuff like that. So that's why like all the fighting scenes are very sort of like, exaggerated. And
Mm-hmm.
also in this scene with the explosion, you see that a lot in American movies. Like when you see an action movie, there's a big explosion in the back, and there's a main character in the front, like looking all cool and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a hit to Western movies a little bit,
Okay. Okay.
American more
Uh,
specifically.
All right, that might be one way of looking at it. I don't know if the director meant it that way, but that is an interesting way because, like, if you turn on this film and you don't know what it's about, and you see a murder, then you see an explosion, you might be like, okay, I'm tuning in for some great action. The first thing I thought, well, actually, not the first thing, but by the second time I watched this film and I saw Saner kill the guy who was running away, I was like, that's an interesting way of happening of that happening, right? Because he kills two people who were obviously posed a threat to him, but then he kills somebody by shooting him in the back, right? And the thing is, when it comes to violence, right, people view violence as necessary when it threatens your lives, but people also view violence as important for cleaning up society, right? Or as in making sure society is safer. And that's when you get into the controversies of this. So imagine if somebody breaks into your home, right? And you wake up and you got your gun or your baseball bat and you try to whack at them, but they're running away and you kill them while they're jumping back out of the window. Now, some people would say that's still self-defense. Like in America, if somebody breaks in your home and you shoot them in the back, that's not murder. But in other countries, someone breaks in your home and you shoot them in the back, that's murder, right? And so I think that part of the film asks a big question to the audience, like when he shot the guy in the back who tried to rob him, was that murder? And then that reflects back on you on how you see it, because a guy from Texas will say, well, he did the right thing, but some guy from Germany might be like, that's horrible. I don't know. What did you think about that?
That's an interesting point. I did not think of that, but I don't know. That is like very controversial, and I don't know if there's a true answer to this. But I would, in my opinion, I would say like, yeah, if someone is running away from me, and I have the feeling that they're gonna like disappear and not hurt me anymore, then I probably would not prefer to shoot them.
Mm,
But at the same time, it's like in that moment you're being attacked, and you might not know like what you're gonna do
hmm.
because all the endorphins rush and stuff like that.
Right, right.
So yeah, I mean, in the movie, it seemed like the guy did it out of spite. It
Yeah.
didn't feel like he was scared. He was pretty like he was looking pretty tough.
Right. Well, the thing about Soner, and that's the guy who's on the motorcycle with dressed in all black in the bull's hat. The thing about him is that he always has a cold effect on his face. He shows no emotion, nothing like that. So when he does kill the people, he doesn't smile, he doesn't cry, he doesn't grin, he doesn't do anything. So you're sort of left to interpret how he's feeling because there is no emotion he shows throughout the movie, throughout all of his crimes, because he will do more crimes. But I think that's a big question that I think has to be asked at the beginning of the movie to whoever who's talking about this movie. Did Soner murder anybody at the beginning of the film, or did he act in self defense? And the different answers from the people will tell you a lot about what they believe. And in my opinion, Soner murdered that guy. But other people might say, no, he was stopping bad people from continuing to exist in our world.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go to the next part. So the rest of the movie doesn't start with Saner's story, the guy on the motorcycle. We go to another guy who was on the motorcycle eating the apple when it exploded, and his name is Daihai. So Daihai is this very tall, very husky man. He lives in rural China. He always wears this coat with its collar popped up, and he is the workers' representative at a privatized coal mine. So he's like the union boss for the workers, right? So he's mad that the village is very poor that he lives in, and the local officials got very rich by doing something very shady. They sold the local coal mine to some foreign entity, and they made a ton of money, right? So Daihai is like confronted by these people. He confronts the people over and over again in the society. Like there's the accountant he confronts the village chief, and then he confronts the coal mine owner who sold it and made a ton of money, right? And Daihai is like one of the normal people, right? Like he walks into the factory and he like eats from the bowl of the other workers, right? And he sits down and chats with them and he makes jokes. And when he first goes into the factory, when he gets in there, he talks about, oh, there's this car outside. Whose is it? I'm gonna sell it. I'm gonna sell it like how the workers, I mean, the bosses sold our mine and stuff like that. And everybody laughs. Everybody agrees with him. And then, yeah, basically, Dahai is like always trying to get back at these people. He's trying to confront these people for what they did. What did you think of like Dahai's opening scene?
Yeah, I think like maybe he was one of the most relatable characters for me
Mm,
because there is a lot of like the same thing that happens in Turkey,
mm,
like selling it to a foreign, person and embezzlement and all of those things. And then the ones who suffer from that are usually the workers.
mm,
Like, I don't know, on top of my head, my university was sold to a foreign like company.
mm,
And the thing, like the problem with that is I feel like, when you own a country in a company in another country, it's like you don't really care or have to care about the workers and all these other things that you would care if you were, actually the owner and you were there.
mm.
So it's kind of like makes it easier for people to get treated bad and get being taken advantage of and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
definitely felt like Die High's rage, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
definitely, definitely. When the story started with Dahai and his conflict with the bosses, uh, it made me realize after when I did some research on this film why this film is still banned in China. Because China is like famously a communist country, and in communism everybody's supposed to be equal. There's not supposed to be rich people and stuff like that. But Dahai is like fighting for the workers to have rights, and this is a big issue because of the bribery and corruption that the bosses do and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's why they don't like this film, because it's pointing out like the flaws of the Chinese communist system and like how there still is disparity in wealth and power and stuff. And yeah, man, I was rooting for Daihai, honestly. There was a scene at the beginning where they show that Daihai is a diabetic and he's kind of sick. Do you remember that when he had to put the sugar in his body?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like wondering what are they going to do with that, but I thought it was just meant to show like more depth in the character, like why he's like the way he is. But I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was shown to have more depth, and also like it's like everybody has like different things that they need money for, and one of the things that is probably maybe like the most expensive and costing is like stuff related to health,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something Daihai was struggling with. Like
Mm,
diabetes medicine is not like cheap in
mm,
most countries, I would assume. So
yeah.
yeah, that's like he has to, he literally has to like spend that money, like how he needs to buy food and stuff like that, or how he needs to pay rent, because otherwise he will probably not be able to function and work like he does.
Yeah, I didn't think
So
about that. He's sick, so he really needs money to do what he's doing.
yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. All right, so yeah, basically, what the boss who sold the coal mine comes back on a plane. He bought a private plane, and there was a funny line when Daihai finds out that the boss bought a plane. He says, "What? Living on the Earth isn't enough." I just thought that line was funny. That was kind of clever. But yeah, he confronts the boss on the tarmac when he shows up, and when the boss leaves and everybody else leaves, he's attacked by one of the boss's guys, and he hits him over the head with a shovel. He hits him really hard over the head, and as he's hitting him, one of the other bosses who's watching Daihai get attacked, he says, "Hey man, are you playing golf?" And he keeps on hitting his head like he's whacking a ball on the golf course and stuff like that. I thought that was hilarious. Daihai goes to the hospital. He didn't die. They wrap his head up. The bosses send their henchmen to pay him money, and Daihai is just just distraught. He's just dissuaded by everything like that. He then goes to his nephew's house or some young man's house, and he asks like, "Where's your father?" His father went hunting animals, and Daihai is like there with his head bandaged. And then that young man's mother comes, and Daihai and her have a conversation, and she tells Daihai like, you're getting older. You need to get married. You need to, settle down, open a business. Don't try to be like those guys. They've surpassed you. You went to school with them, but you're not as rich as them. And Daihai's like, I will be richer than them. And he tries to like make a move on her, but then she's like, no, not here. So that goes to show like Daihai probably loves this girl, but she doesn't feel that same way about him, or their love couldn't be together because of something like that. So I think that shows that Daihai is flawed. But yeah, what did you think about everything that happened, up to that when Daihai got attacked and shit like that?
Yeah, I mean, the attacking scene was so brutal because it's like, these rich men who got rich by embezzlements and stuff like that, unfair ways, and then they can just like do whatever they want without any consequences, without even like having to suffer through looking at him getting beaten. It's so like inhumane, and yeah, like that was an insane scene, and they kind of like show violence in this movie like it's not that bad, if that makes sense. Like they show it like it's a part of everyday life
Mm,
or something,
mm-hmm,
and maybe that's like another message to be taking from this movie. And when it comes to the girl and stuff, I think like it's also hard to get married, find someone when you don't have money.
mm-hmm,
Because if you want to meet somebody, you have to take them on a date, and if you want to get married, you have to have money for the wedding, so
mm,
on and so on, with kids and everything. So it's like if you don't have money, it's like you're really like living like a plant
mm,
a little bit. And especially for Daihai, like he wouldn't be able to afford his medicine, he wouldn't be able to you know marry this girl that she likes
mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So it kind of like disables him in every way, and
Yeah,
maybe that's why he did what he did as
yeah.
well, because he was like, oh, like I can't do anything.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't catch that part. Like maybe he couldn't get married to her because of his diabetes and he couldn't afford her and stuff like that. By the way, I see Avery Adams jumped into the chat. Shout out to Avery, big dog right here. And yeah, the other part about like Daihai, like trying to make a move on this married woman, showed me that he's like not perfect too. Yeah, so that's what I picked up from that scene. And also, Daihai knew some English, which was funny because he's like animal, and that takes a. I think the animals are like a bigger part of this film, right? Because I think in this part, that's when they start to describe like humans as animals. Because after Daihai leaves the woman's house, he goes back home and he takes off his bandages. He grabs his gun, loads it up with bullets, and oh no, I skipped a part. Before he goes home, he sees that all the village people are like gathered around watching like some Chinese play, and the village people see that Daihai is there, and they all turn around and they all call him Mr. Golf. Yeah, that's your name now because everybody knows you got beat up by the bosses. So we saw your head get bashed in, so we're gonna call you Mr. Golf, and that was kind of funny. And yeah, there's also some play that talks about something, but that's Chinese, so I'm not gonna get into it. I'm not gonna try to decipher that metaphor. But he goes home, grabs his gun, wraps it up in a blanket that has a golden tiger on it, and goes out, to get some vengeance, do some business. And he goes to the accountant's house and puts a piece of paper on the accountant's table and says, "Mr. Accountant, tell me how much you wrote in bribes." The accountant doesn't want to do it. He looks Daihai straight in the eye and says, you pussy, Daihai, you ain't gonna pull the trigger. You gonna always be a and bam, gets his whole chin blown off. His wife comes and she gets knocked down too. What did you think about that scene?
Okay, so before the scene, I just want to go back to the little like Chinese play that they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think like I really liked that because it reminded me of Turkey. And in Turkey, like we had these two characters, and we don't know if they actually lived or not. But the rumor is that these two characters were like two people who really like doing plays, and they started doing plays for the regular people, for the worker class, and people used to like go and watch them in the square
Mm,
after work, and they used to do comedy, but they used to make fun of like the sultan and stuff like that.
mm,
And this is supposed to be like during the Ottoman time.
mm,
And the rumor is that they one of their plays went up to the sultans during that time, and they got their heads cut off, and they even made a movie about this. So it kind of reminded me of that, and I was thinking, okay, could it be something similar to those things? Like maybe the type of plays that they're doing there, they're for the regular working class people, and they reflect the stories of regular people,
mm,
because it kind of looks like a love story ish,
mhm,
but maybe I don't know, it's not, and maybe it could be the love story like a man wants to marry the girl and doesn't have enough money and stuff like that.
Interesting, interesting. I didn't really see any parallels for me with the play, but it's interesting to see that there's something similar in Turkey.
Yeah, and yeah, when it comes to the shooting scene, like I said again, it was like just very real, but it also felt a bit exaggerated because I wasn't really expecting him to shoot as well.
Mm,
And yeah, it was also interesting like that he had like the tiger thingy like blanket,
hmm.
and I was also at the same time thinking like, okay, how is he able to like walk around with this like gun just
Yeah.
wrapped in a blanket? You know, like just because it's wrapped in a blanket doesn't mean like people can't see it's a gun.
Well, I think it's very similar to like in my state in Louisiana. It's in rural parts of America. It might be very common to see somebody just walking with their shotgun, walking with their tool or piece. Like whole states in Texas, you can walk around with an AK-47 on your hip, right? Like you can do that in certain parts of America, especially rural parts. And this story takes place in rural China, so maybe it was the same. Because remember, he goes and talks to that little boy, and the little boy says his father went hunting, right? And then after Dai Hai kills the accountant, he walks outside with the gun, and people say, "Where are you going, Mr. Golf?" And he says, "I'm hunting animals," right? So yeah, I thought it was very cool how he wrapped the thing in the tiger blanket, and how the tiger sort of symbolizes this like fierce animal ready to like hunt and kill. But the animal in this case is really Daihai because he's acting out of emotion and committing atrocities against people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, what he's doing is really bad, but at the same time, I can't help but sympathize with him, like we said in the beginning.
Mm,
Like his rage is very like understandable. Not that like we should go and shoot everyone,
right.
but just like he sort of has like the psychosis,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like he's like I cannot do with these like motherfuckers,
Yeah.
so I have to like kill them.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah,
All right. And so then after he kills the accountant, he goes by and kills like the village chief. And then as he leaves the village chief's house, he sees this man who's whipping his mule unfairly. And we saw this man earlier in the film, but we didn't talk about it. But basically, there's two scenes where this man is whipping his horse just for doing nothing, whipping it, whipping it, whipping it. And so when Daihai sees him the second time, he kills the horse owner, right? And he smiles. And then he finally makes it to the man who sold the mine. He jumps in the back of his Maserati and basically blows his brains out. And as he's covered in blood in the back of the Maserati, he smiles. And I just found out that this story is based on a true story about a mass shooting that happened in China in 2001, where this guy killed 14 people, 8 men, 6 women, from 11 different families, and he injured 3 people. And he did it because he claimed the reason for his crime was the local government officials violated his interests, which caused widespread controversy. Basically, they're not going into details of what exactly happened, but maybe he got fired unjustly from the coal mine. Maybe they stole some of his wages. I don't know. But some people in China review that guy as a hero, the guy who did the mass shooting, because they felt like he was fighting back against society. The person I'm referring to is a man called Hu Wei Wenhan. Hu Wenhai. Okay, my Chinese is horrible if you didn't know. But yeah, like you said, we felt for Daihai, and at the end, you're sort of satisfied to see Daihai get his revenge on all those people. But what did you think at the end?
yeah. I think it was like really interesting that they added like the man with the horse,
Mm,
because it was like Daihai is actually like not a bad guy. I felt like it was giving me that message. Like he stopped and he was feeling so bad for this animal that he wanted to like let him go of his misery, and
mm-hmm,
then he killed the owner.
mm-hmm,
So like because in the first scene that we see, like the owner hits the mule so bad that the mule like falls into the ground,
mm-hmm,
and so it gave a sense that like if you ask other people, they would describe him like, yeah, he wouldn't hurt anybody or
mm-hmm.
something like that. Like it gave that sense that he's actually a good guy who has like a good heart, but he's in such a bad situation and he can't do anything about it. If
Mm-hmm.
you think about it, like this guy did everything that he could to try
Mm-hmm.
to change this situation that is unjust,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't get anything out of it. He got beaten, he got made fun of.
Mm-hmm.
So like really he was in such a bad situation. He had two choices. Like he was either gonna like accept his fate and go on living his life in misery, or like do something bad.
Yeah.
And he went like the other way. But I just really liked that horse scene. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's we skipped over somebody else that Daihai killed because you made me remember when you said he was made fun of. Because the first guy that called him Mr. Golf, he kills him as well, which kind of makes you feel conflicted. Once again, is Daihai actually sympathetic? Because like Saner at the beginning of the movie, he kills 3 people, but one of them felt unjust. And when Daihai killed the guy with the big head who called him Mr. Golf, it felt unjust. I also have a theory about Daihai that he went crazy when he got hit with the shovel. And so I'm thinking Daihai is actually not to blame for the murders of the people, because in a way, when the people attacked him and broke his brain, they caused him to become this murderous animal. That's my theory, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, if it even if it's not physiologically like that's, I feel like psychologically it was that. Yeah, like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, like they made him do this. Actually, like it was their own doing that they got like that. This guy, like Mr. Jiao, the owner of
Mm-hmm.
the company, it was his doing that he got killed. He
Mm.
got himself killed a little bit.
Well. See, that's where we got to step back. So the question is, do people really deserve to die for doing corruption, right? Like there's a story right now in Vietnam where this woman stole $12 billion from the government, right? And they sentenced her to death. Like, does the death penalty warrant people? Is the death penalty warranted for people who are corrupt? That's the question. Because you took it there, actually. I don't know if I can agree with
No,
that.
no, I don't think like people who do embezzlement and stuff like that. I don't think they should die. I do think all of their things should be taken away, and then they should go to prison, and then they should come back to society with nothing. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I think should happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying like him killing the owner was just. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. But I'm just saying like if you're trying to find a where it began, it was like with him.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, through some roundabout way, we can always justify violence, and I think that's an even bigger question that this film asks. Because what the guys did was wrong, like stealing the town's money and all of that. But it doesn't justify murder, right? And like you just said, no. But at the beginning, your reaction was kind of, well, they kind of did it to themselves, and that's a dangerous slope to get into. You get what I'm saying? I think that's what this movie is trying to do, because it makes us question the motives of violence and why violence happens.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I should pick my words more carefully, but yeah, like killing someone is never just.
Hmm.
But yeah, at the same time, we cannot like just unsee the unfairness
Yeah,
some people commit.
yeah,
Not that we should kill them, but
yeah.
also like it was kind of like Daihai killed the guy who enabled embezzlement and enabled this guy to get rich, right?
Hmm.
The owner, and
Hmm.
then he shot the person who was like a follower, like an
Hmm.
ass kisser,
Hmm.
right? And who made fun of him because he wasn't an ass kisser, and Daihai was a rebel,
Hmm.
so he got ridiculed by this guy. So he
Hmm.
shot an enabler, a follower, and then the person itself.
Hmm.
And the only person who died because of no reason was the wife. Like, what did she do?
But see, this is why I love my wife, everybody, because she's smart. She broke that down. She broke that down for real, for real. But that's the thing, because like we could say Daihai is at war with the capitalists who own this society, own his world, right? But there are casualties there. But then you have to ask, once again, are the casualties justified, right? He killed the accountant, but did the wife have to die too? Well, she was there. She was going to tell, so she has to die, right? And see, this is a slippery slope of violence, because we might say we hate X thing, right? So let's fight it. Okay, but these people or this thing is in the way of us killing the thing that we really want to die. Well, they have to die too because they're in the way. You get what I'm saying? Like this is the slippery slope of how humans rationalize the evil we do to each other. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, and I also think like this is also like a question about the system too, because would the guy who did the embezzlement, the boss, would he exist without the enablers and without the followers? Would
Mm,
he be able to do this embezzlement without them? And at the same time, would the enablers and followers exist without the guy? It's
mm,
like it's I don't know if I can explain it, but it's like saying would the celebrities exist without fans or vice versa?
right,
So
right.
it's kind of like that. And if you look at the system, you do always have like this one bad rich guy, right?
Mm.
And all the people who do whatever he says and the people who follow him and stuff like that. So really, who's to blame here? Is it the head guy or is it the other guys who enables those things?
I'll take it a step further. The person to blame is Daihai himself. Because think about this. In the film, so many people got rich, right? Okay, a few people got rich. The three guys who enabled the thing, the accountant, the village chief, and the factory owner, right? And then everybody else in the society is sort of going along to get along. Oh, they're gonna each give us a bag of flour if we meet them at the airport. Oh, hey, Mr. Golf. Yes, I'm working for the village chief right now. Like everybody else seems to be living a good life. Meanwhile, Daihai is this revolutionary who wants to upend the entire system because he secretly wants to get rich too. Daihai said it himself. I will be more evil than Jiao. I'll be more evil than the village chief. You get what I'm saying? So if you really look at it from another perspective, Daihai is really the bad one here because everybody else in society is functioning like normal.
Yeah, they are functioning, but I don't think like Daihai would do the same thing if everyone was earning what they deserved, or at least if everyone was earning equally. Like yes, some people got rich, but they never will get rich as the owner itself himself, and they are just baits. So it's like, okay, maybe those people who go along with the system, not diehard, are the ones to blame because nobody is batting an eye on anything, and they're just surviving. So just surviving is better than like not doing something.
All right, but that describes the world right now, Acti. How many people come out, every day and say, "Let's burn down the system," or "We need to change the system, change the society," and everybody just says, "Well, I don't care. I mean, I get my paycheck. I don't care. I got my house. I got my car. I got my crib." A lot of people don't really want to change the system. Like the movie in the Die High section makes it more extreme because we see these people living in real poverty, but they actually are kind of adjusting to this new status quo. They might be brainwashed. They might be sheep, but they're actually doing okay. Hey, we get free flour every now and then. We have a job. We have a factory. Maybe we don't own it, but we didn't own anything anyway. So I'll never forget this quote that Muammar Gaddafi said. Muammar said, my people have lived without money for thousands of years. We can live for another week without money, right? Like this is the way a lot of people live around the world. So why shake it? Why shake the status quo? You get what I'm saying?
I'm saying we need to shake it. Let's go. I mean, of course, nobody, the thing is like naturally we are inclined to keep the peace because nobody wants to like die or get hurt by like disrupting the system. So as humans, it's just like our nature, to go along because that's the most like non-harmful way to live. That's just a natural inclination. But it's also like the depression underneath that is also very real, I feel like.
But the more I start to talk about it and the more I start to think about it, and off of what you're saying, Acti, Daihai really starts to seem like the villain because at the end of the day, violence like this is never necessary to change things. And because he took that path of violence to try to make this change, that makes him automatically in the wrong. And if the rest of the people are doing okay and they're okay with everything, then who are we to say that they're wrong, right? In your country, in my country, there's a way of doing things. People are just okay with it and they don't want to change it. So why even bother?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they make that critique for Turkey, with the with all the prices going up, and some people say like, oh, people are always complaining about the prices going up, but everybody's still buying groceries, everybody's still buying clothes, everybody's still going on holidays. Like, why are people complaining? So everybody's like adjusting. But like, is that a reason for the government to make everything even more expensive? You know what I mean? I don't know. Like, of course, the best way to do this sort of revolution is peaceful revolution, right? Peaceful protest. Like, I don't know. Everybody draw all your bank accounts now and let's make all the, rich people fail and stuff like that. Maybe something like that, but not by violence. But it's just, it's sort of like an impossible situation.
Right. You know what? I'm going to be honest. I agree with you, like about how Daihai is like trying to change the system in the film and stuff like that. It's just I'm just entertaining the other side of the argument because it's very easy to look at this film and just say Daihai was in the right. But if you take a step back and think about your own life, your own society, you'll see that we're all sort of living in a system where we get the bare crumbs, the bare minimum, and we accept it. Our bosses give us a bag of flour every month or every 2 weeks, and we sort of just eat it up and take it. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
yeah. But one more thing I want to say, because we spent a lot of time on Daihai, but that's because it's probably the best story here in this
Yeah.
4-part series. The last thing I want to say is that when Daihai killed the mule whipper, I felt like the animal symbolized the people there who were being abused by the people more powerful. And when the mule whipper was killed, the people were set free, just like the animal was. And the final scene, the police are pulling up, and the mule is like walking away, pulling a cart. My theory is that Daihai escaped, and he was laying down in the back of the cart. That's my theory.
Yeah, that could be true. I can see that happening.
And I thought that would be cool for a sequel. A Touch of Sin 2. touching more. A Touch of Sin 2.
Touch
Touching
us
your body.
into Daihai's story.
Daihai's revenge. Die high hard.
No, I knew you were going to do this. I knew it.
Die high hard. All right. Anyway, let's get a story too. So the guy at the beginning of the film, Saner, who pulls up on the motorcycle, he returns to his hometown, Chongqing, for Chinese New Year and to celebrate his mother's 70th birthday. So his estranged wife rejects his mysterious monetary contributions to the family. On New Year's Eve, Saner bonds with his son by firing off his pistols during a fireworks show. Following the New Year celebrations, Saner buys bus tickets for 3 cities, seemingly at random, avoiding his wife's questions. The source of Saner's income is revealed when he heads into town and methodically guns down a woman and her husband before snatching her handbags and then leaves Chongqing. Saner's story is loosely based on that of Zhu Kehua, a gunman who committed several murders and robberies between 2004 and 2012. What did you think in total of Saner's story before we get into the details of it?
For me, Saner's story was like my least favorite and least relatable to me because off the bat he was like this cold stone killer, and I felt like okay, like I didn't know what his motive was really, and or like how did he end up becoming like a serial killer and stuff like that. And I was just like in my head thinking like, oh my god, this guy is so violent that he like fires his gun and then tells his son that it's the firework. So it's like I don't know, like for me, he was just like pure violence.
Wait. I'm sorry, Acti. I have to laugh at that because I don't know. For me as an American, that's like normal. That's like Tuesday. That's like every 4th of July, every New Year's. But in Turkey, they don't do that. They don't shoot guns in the air for celebrations and stuff.
Yeah, they do. Like in weddings, some weddings, not all. Like
okay, and what about New Year's or other holidays?
Like yeah, of course some people do, but it's usually seen like the people who fire a gun during those like events and celebrations, they're seen as like sort of ghetto.
Lower class, less educated.
Not lower. I mean, it can be like a higher class person, I guess, if they're like a cop or something and they own a gun naturally. they might do it as well, I guess. But it's usually like I just imagine like people doing it in an open field, and then like it's probably like 4 or 5 guys all together drinking beer and they fire. Like that's what I imagine when I think of Turkey and that guy and
Okay.
that gun thing.
Okay. Okay. Moving forward, let's use the word ratchet or ignorant instead of ghetto. I think that might be a bit better. I
Okay,
like that.
yeah,
It's a bit ratchet. It's a bit ignorant.
like I don't know, like I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. I got you. Go ahead though. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it was just funny that you said, "Oh, he shot fire. He shot the gun with the fireworks." Go ahead.
yeah, like I don't know, like what his deal was with his family. I felt like maybe okay, like maybe nobody knows he's a serial killer in his family, right? And so like he's maybe ashamed, he's trying to hide it, but he didn't seem like he was ashamed by the fact that he was a serial killer, really.
Mm,
And he turns down the money back, like given to him by his brother and stuff like that. It's like he only wants the sinful money,
hmm.
and he wouldn't take the money like from his family.
Right. Right.
And yeah, like and he buys like the 3 tickets to different cities. I don't
Hmm.
know why that was. Maybe he was trying not to get caught.
Hmm.
And yeah, like I just didn't really get him because it felt like he could have had a good life, not a good one, but at least he had a family, he had a kid, he had like brothers, he had a mom.
Mm.
It wasn't that bleak. And then like he was a serial killer. So for me, it wasn't that I wasn't sympathizing with him.
Right, right. For me, the first time I watched it, I wasn't impressed with Sanair's story. But the second time I watched it, I actually liked it a bit more than Dahai's part. Because looking at Sanair, you're getting a view into the mind of a stone cold killer, like you said. And coming from like Louisiana, we have all these people that do all of these murders. We have serial killers like in our state, like basically people who do all sorts of clapping of bodies all the time, and they're never caught, and they move in certain ways and stuff like that. And the way Sanair moved was so ill. It was just he's just an ill dude the way he did it. And I don't know if that makes me distorted in my mind, but I sort of kind of admire the way he moved and did his business. Not saying it's right that he was a serial killer, but the way he was smart about it, and also he had respect for the dead. Like I realized I liked Sanair's part when I don't know if you noticed this, right? His brothers come and they got some money from people who brought donations to his mother for her birthday party, and his brothers bought some fancy cigarettes, like very fancy, expensive cigarettes, and they gave Sanair 3 cigarettes right there. And the way he he burnt the cigarettes, right? He burned the 3 cigarettes and put them up in the air. And his wife comes into the room and she's like, people usually pray to the gods on New Year's night. And he's like, I'm not praying to the gods, I'm praying to the ghost. And the 3 cigarettes represent the 3 people that he killed at the beginning of the movie. I was like, okay, that's hard. That's hard. Did you catch that part?
I did not connect those 2 events, but that is kind of dope. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he said to the cigarettes, he put them down to his face and he said, blame the gods. It wasn't my fault. Like so Saner doesn't view like I don't know, it's interesting. He's like he doesn't view what he does as like his fault. He views it all as fate. Like violence, the death that he causes, it's just a natural part of what was already planned, if that makes sense. You get what I'm saying?
Okay. Okay. No, I get what you're saying. I mean, maybe in that event, I could see how he might think that
Yeah.
because the robbers came on his way, right? He
Yeah,
didn't go
yeah.
searching for them.
Right, right.
But then the one after that, like with the woman on the street, like that wasn't that that was just like straight out like murder.
Yeah, but he views it as just like a part of the job. It's just what he does. You get what I'm saying?
Mm.
And another thing I thought was interesting was like he was really thugged out. Like Sanel was super gangster, and maybe this is the toxic part of me because like I love hip hop and like hip hop culture is definitely tied to mafioso gangster culture. Like he was a thug, and his wife was getting that thug love. Do you think his wife knew what he was doing? Because he was sending a lot of money. Like he sent her 137,000 won, which is way more money than anybody else in the movie was ever talking about. So Saner was like one of the richest characters in the story. Do you think his wife knew and she was just acting ignorant? What do you think?
I don't think she exactly knew what he was doing. Maybe she thought he was, yeah, doing something criminal, but not killing people. Maybe she thought he was stealing or something. And because like she tells him that like I don't need your money anymore, something like that when she was mad at him.
Mhm.
And so that kind of shows like okay, maybe she knows that he's doing something bad and she just wants him to be with them and at peace and not doing anything like bad.
Yeah.
So I think she knew, but she didn't know like this stone cold killer was giving her dick at night. You know.
I disagree. Women know when a man is cheating, and they know when their man is up to no good.
Yeah,
So,
like she knew there was a crime, but I don't think she knew it was killing.
man, she went in his bag and found the gun.
Yeah, but with a gun you can do a lot of different things.
Okay,
Like
come on,
you
come
can
on.
rob a store without killing anyone with a gun.
Oh, come on. I think finding guns in your man's pocket and he's sending you large amount. Actually, look, be real. If you found a gun in my house, plus I was coming home with large amounts of money and giving it to you, you would know that I was on some G shit. Come on.
Okay, I don't know what G shit is, but I would assume you were robbing some place. I wouldn't assume that you were killing people, but since you are also like not a violent person at all and you don't like guns, I would be like super freaked out. Yeah, but that's just because you're you.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, you're not like aggressive and violent in that way at all. So
Yeah, yeah. But going back to the beginning of when Saner shows up at his mother's birthday party. Like he shows up and the whole town hears that he's coming, and everybody sort of looks like disturbed and they're kind of shocked too that he's there. And he sees his son, and his son just looks at him, and then Saner like grabs his cheeks and pinches them really hard, and his son tries to run away, and then his wife grabs his son, like spanks him and brings him back, and Saner's mother looks at him and his family with like this look of like disgust on her face, and then Saner and his wife like bow down to his mother, and he's like forcing his son to bow down too, which I think shows that Saner is like not loved by people in the community or the family, and on top of that, he doesn't like have a good relationship with his son too, and he's also putting like force and evil like in his son as well because of like how he's like making him bow too to his mother and doing it in a forceful way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, there was definitely like some generational trauma going on with their family. I don't know, like, yeah, probably we don't know like where his father is as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he died, or maybe we don't know if his father was a criminal,
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. So yeah, there's definitely something going on with his like childhood
Yeah.
and how he treats like his son, and also like why he's the way he is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there was also that scene when Saner is like walking home, and there's this like farmer who like kills a duck or a chicken or something, and he like kills the duck by letting it bleed out through his neck. And a lot of people find that to be like torturous to kill animals that way, but that's like the halal way. So that's like how Muslims are supposed to kill their food. But I didn't know that's how they did it in China. But I think they showed the death of that animal to show that in Saner's area where he grew up, like violence and bloodshed is sort of like a bit natural. And then later on that day, Saner is like at some card playing place, like some I guess some old drinking spot in his hood, and two guys start arguing because one of the guys says that the other guy's girlfriend caught AIDS and he needs to go get checked because maybe he's got AIDS. And then the other guy says, no, your girl got AIDS. And it was like, and they start fighting like in the club. And Saner is just like looking at it like it's normal. And that touched me because that's sort of like very similar to like in Louisiana. Like you go to the club, you will see a fight. Every time you go out in Monroe, Louisiana, I swear to God, there's never been a time I've gone out and there has not been a fight at the end of the night, period. Period. So I was like, that is so parallel, so similar to like our situation in the States. You know what I mean? And you're just sitting back watching this violence and this ignorance play out in front of you. So I don't know. That's what I got from Saner's environment. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean it's similar. I had the same feeling, and once again, like also in Turkey, in rural places, and in smaller like villages, sort of, especially towards like the east and also the middle, and even in some like places in west as well. You would see like fights for women, and then like some guy stabbed another guy, or
Mm-hmm.
shot another guy because some people like have guns there, and it's like easier
Mm-hmm.
because they also say like it's for protection from like wild animals, like wild pigs and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
as well. And yeah, so that was like also very similar to those places in Turkey as well.
Yeah, yeah. And moving forward, like when Saner actually, goes out and kills the woman, that was a very hard scene to watch. But it was interesting how he did it. So he like pretends to be like a construction worker or something like that. Sees a woman, going out to the ATM, and basically like waits for her in broad daylight to like walk away, and then shoots her in the back of the head, takes her purse, and walks away like nothing happens. Very chilling to watch that. To see that happen, like that's how Saner makes his money, and there's no justification for it at all. Like you can't even find a reason why, other than the maybe generational trauma that he's suffering or the lack of opportunities, or maybe he's just turned that way in his mind. Like Saner is the definition of I am just like this. I'm built like this. Like there's no other way. I was cut from this cloth. And it makes me think about the scene when he's like laying up with his girl, and his girl is like, what are you gonna do? What's something you want? And Saner says, I want a new pistol, and I want to go to Burma. And I thought it was interesting he said Burma because Burma is the country of Myanmar, and in Myanmar they've been having a civil war for like the past 15 years. And I'm like, Saner really does love war. Like, there's nothing else about him. He loves blood. He loves war. He just loves violence. And it's like the question is, okay, what do we do with people like this in society? Like I don't know. I feel like Saner is like I don't know, evil incarnate, the god Mars. You get what I'm
I
saying?
mean, there are like pathological people like that, yeah, and that is caused by, it's not like by nature, but it's caused by like childhood and stuff,
Mm,
right? And so that is a good question because it's like, okay, I'm good at talking to people, so I will become an entrepreneur. But what if you're good at like killing people and stuff like that? So then you're gonna become a killer.
mm,
So that is a question, but I mean, I guess a good place for those people is the army,
mm,
maybe. They love it that much since like Saner wants to go to Burma to go, kill men in the civil war.
mm.
That would be a good place for them, but not as like generals, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, like I think a little bit of how Saneer, like that scene where he's changing clothes and to go and kill the woman and stuff like that, like how he's preparing to do his crime. It
Mm,
reminded me of Ocean's 11,
mm,
or like films like that where you see like this smart murder or robber or something like that, and how they do like all those like weird tricks,
mm,
and you almost like them because
mm,
they're so smart about it.
mm,
And maybe it was another hint to the Western media a little bit,
mm,
because it does also feel a bit like unreal, like those things. You know what I mean?
No, I
Like,
didn't. I didn't feel like that was unreal. Like when you think about it, Sanaire always wears all black, just like anybody who's a killer would, because you don't want to leave a trace or leave anything in particular, like no distinct colors. So I think like the way Sanaire dressed in that scene, it was like almost sort of like ritualistic and religious, because he knew what he had to do today. He was going to light another cigarette.
yeah, I know, but I'm saying like I'm not saying like his dress was unrealistic. I'm saying like, oh, how like he planned the whole thing, not specifically in this movie, but in general, like in those type of movies, in those scenes, it feels like Hollywood. You know, it doesn't feel that real to have this, huge plot and stuff like that, and that everything goes according to plan, and they have like weird machines and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
I'm just saying like, yeah, in this scene, it felt a bit more realistic because yeah, it was realistic. It's a realistic movie, but maybe it was a hint to those type of films.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But basically, like Sanaire, like skips town, gets on a bus, and one of the last scenes that we see with Sanaire, he's on a bus with a bunch of people traveling to some other city in China, and they're all watching like a very violent movie on screen, like where somebody's like busting his gun a million times and stuff like that. And it was just so interesting to show this cycle of violence. Like all the people are sitting there just passively watching people get murdered on screen. Right? What did you think about that?
Yeah, it is interesting, like how much violence we have actually around ourselves, around our kids, like around everyone. And of course, like I'm not saying like we should never have violence or we should never see violence because it is part of nature, right? Even with animals, there is violence. And so, but like to what extent and for what reasons we are seeing violence and how it penetrates our brain. I think that's the most important part when we like have all this violence in front of us, whether it's like seeing an animal get killed or seeing an action movie,
Hmm.
all different types. Like seeing an animal get killed, maybe that's okay
Hmm.
for to some extent because it is food and it is
Right.
survival. But yeah, how necessary is the action movie?
Yeah, I think because this film is so realistic and every gunshot feels intentional, every time somebody dies, it feels visceral. Like when you compare the action film that they showed in the film to when Sanaire killed a woman in cold blood in broad day, it makes you feel like, damn, we really cheapen human life that much that we make movies where somebody busts their guns a million times and kills 20 men in one scene and stuff like that. It makes John Wick look silly when you have Sanaire on screen, you know?
Yeah, you know what? This is something I always think about. Like
Tell me.
when we have those action movies and there are 20 people who are fighting, but the main guy is after the bad guy and it's like one bad guy, but he has to kill another 15 guys because they're on his in his way.
Hmm.
And I always think like, what are happening to those guys? Or I always think like, why would you sacrifice your life like that? Because if I had a bad like boss and something like that happened, I would probably run. Like I
Yeah.
would run. But I always think that in those action movies.
Yeah, it is silly when you think about it because the way people die in action movies is like nobody ever screams, nobody ever shits themselves, nobody ever like loses a finger and then like is like crying like a baby asking for their mother. Like when we really think about it, even though this film didn't show anything like that, when people die from gun violence or get hurt from gun violence, it's very traumatic, right? I watch these videos on the internet all the time of people getting shot and stuff like that, and it's never anything, not even close, 0%. I have yet to see a film where somebody is like shot and it's remotely close to what it's like when people actually get shot. And so, yeah, we do like you said in those action movies, make it seem really silly.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the third story. So Sanaire gets off the bus, and then the camera pans to this other guy, to this woman, to this man who's going to meet some woman at some distant location. So Zhao Yu meets with her lover Yu Liang, a married man in Yichang, and gives him an ultimatum to divorce his wife within 6 months. Yu Liang heads to Guangdong, and Zhao Yu heads to her job as a receptionist at a spa. There, she is assaulted by Yu Liang's wife and her hired thugs, and flees to a van offering a fortune-telling service. Zhao Yu hitches a ride with some construction workers to see her mother. On her way back, she witnesses corrupt local officials ordering thugs to beat up a worker who refuses to pay an arbitrarily set up toll. That night, as she leaves her shift, Zhao Yu encounters the same officials who harass and assault her when she refuses to give in to their demands for sex. She snaps and kills one of the officials with a fruit knife left behind by Yu Liang. Leaving her workplace in shock, she calls emergency services and confesses to the murder. This segment is based on the Deng Xiao incident, which took place in 2009. And I guess this story, it's about a 21-year-old pedicure worker who tried to rebuff the advances of Deng Guida, another man, director of the local township business promotions office, who had come to the hotel seeking sexual services. Okay, so back in the day, there was this, Chinese spa worker, this woman, who killed a man who came in there trying to have sex with her. So this is based on a true story too. But yeah, what did you think of that story?
Yeah, I think like yeah, it was interesting and it also showed like how women I really like that, they included a woman here as the main character in one of the stories because it was like how do women get affected by this system? Because in a way you can think of women maybe they can escape it to an extent because they can rely on a man to, have income.
Hmm.
But at the same time like it's not like that and it's never that simple. And also, if you think about it, even if that was the case, if a woman was depending on a man to have a living, if the man is broke, you're broke too. Like, you know,
Mm.
it goes hand in hand. And with her case, like she had a man, but the man was married, and he was playing with her, and she was basically on his own trying to make his own living. And I felt for her because it was like, you know, you spend all this time putting your energy to someone, and they give you false promises, and she shouldn't have done it in the first place. But yeah, like I felt for her in that, like the first scene, and I felt like from her face we knew that she knew that,
Mhm.
you know, he was not gonna get a divorce,
Mhm.
because that would have felt like, that's what it felt like to me at least.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I got like from the first part of her story. What did you think?
Yeah. What I liked about her story is that I feel like her story has the most animal symbols in them. Like when she's walking in the street one day and there's a snake that slithers in front of her path. She's at the spa and watching a documentary about animals, and she finds out animals sometimes commit suicide. When she kills the man, she's walking down the street and there's another man holding a monkey on his shoulder, and the monkey sees her and looks down in shame. And then when she's like walking in the street, there's a bunch of cows that come into her path. So there was like so much animal symbols in this film that in her segment in particular that I really liked. And as for her story in and of itself, I thought it was very real too. Like it felt very visceral because like when the guys burst into the room and they say, you know, we want to sleep with you, and the official says, I have money, I'll drown you in money, and he's slapping her with a big stack of ones. It was like very offensive. It was like very real. Like how blatant it was. Like you know how he was trying to lord his power with money over this woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm sorry. Even though that scene was like really bad, it made me smile because we have the saying in Turkish, "I will beat you with my money." It literally translates into that. So I thought of that, and like, of course, it's not a literal meaning. It means like I can make you do anything with my money, right?
Mm,
But like, he literally beat her with his money, so that's why
mm.
I was smiling, because I was like, okay, this is the metaphor coming alive. How weird is that? But yeah, like that whole thing, I think it also creates a connection, and that's the question maybe this story is trying to ask. Like those people who are able to do corruption and able to like hurt people because of money
Mhm,
and stuff like that, they're also able to hurt women and, you know, assault women and try to rape women.
mhm,
Like they are overall bad people. Maybe
mhm.
I don't know if that's what like it was trying to say by, you know, creating that connection there.
Right. I think that's what they were trying to say too, because you know these guys who got the money and they were beating the girl and trying to take it from her and stuff like that. Like these guys were probably new to money, so their whole life they live poor, but then they get money and then they feel different because what happened was like these trucks were passing through the town and they just set up a barrier saying any trucks that pass through here got to pay us 10 won. And so they just get rich overnight because what are the trucks going to do? Like they got to pay or else they're going to get beat up, right? So these guys are very crude, ratchet, ignorant, and so I think that's what also the film was trying to say. Like having money can corrupt, but even ignorant people with money is probably the worst, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and also I feel like maybe it's also trying to say like power and money sort of makes you entitled,
Mm-hmm,
because these guys were literally in a whorehouse slash
mm-hmm,
sauna, because anyone who entered, the girls asked, "Are you in for sauna or for overnight?"
mm-hmm,
So like they were, you know, surrounded by prostitutes and sex
mm-hmm.
workers that could have given them what they wanted,
Right,
but they demanded to like have sex with and harass this main character, the
right,
main lady.
right.
So it was like they feel entitled, you know.
Mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
not that they didn't have woman.
Right, right. I also thought it was interesting in this girl's story. It takes us back to this fight against capitalism that Dahai's story had. Saner's story was different. It was just pathological, evil, thug life violence, right? But this story is back to okay, how does a woman who's in a capitalistic, patriarchal world, how does she survive in it, right? And so it was also interesting. There was a scene when all the people were like sleeping on cots. All the workers have to take breaks, sleeping upstairs, just watching TV and stuff like that. And that's so different in China. Like there are places in China where you work and they give you like a bed, a house, or not a house, but like an apartment room and stuff like that. Very different. And like it was interesting seeing that part of their society, how people are sort of crammed together in serving capitalism. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I this just reminds me, and I know I'm sharing a lot like in this episode,
Mm-hmm,
but it just reminded me of one time me and my friends, we were staying in a hotel, in this big hotel, and we made like friends with the people who work there. Like I think the entertainer guy and a couple of like waiters. And one night, like we went outside and we went clubbing and stuff, and we came back and they were still working, but it was like the end of their shift. So and we like wanted to drink more, and we were talking to them, and they said, "Oh, come to like our room." They were staying in the hotel,
mm-hmm,
and the hotel had given them a room. But when we went to the room, it was like they had a bed on the floor,
mm-hmm.
like just the mattress, and it was like horrible, horrible. Like it hadn't been cleaned for a year. It was
Wow,
basically like a construction site,
wow.
and like their bathroom wasn't working, and we were like just appalled. We were like shocked.
Mm-hmm,
Like they had to live like basically like roaches
mm-hmm.
in here. It was insane.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. And it's crazy that there, that happens so much. And the way it looks in this movie, it seems like that's very common in China. And unfortunately, it's also very common in other parts of the world. I'll never forget there was a time after you and I got married and we went to some restaurant in Istanbul and we met up with all of your friends. And I went to the bathroom while I was trying to look for the bathroom in the restaurant and I opened the wrong door and I found one of the guys like sleeping in the closet and I accidentally woke him up, stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty common in a lot of places. But one more thing I have to say about this girl's story, and we have to wrap up this episode soon because I got to get back to work. It's there was a scene when she's watching the documentary about animals and them committing suicide, and so she finds out this information and she tells one of her other coworkers. She says, "Hey, did you know that animals commit suicide?" And her coworker says, "Oh, I guess the animals don't know. It's better to live miserable than die. It's better to live it's better to live miserable than die happy, right?" So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that. So at the end of the film, when she like kills the two guys who tried to like rape her or something like that, she's walking out in the street and she's almost about to get hit by trucks. Like they're coming up directly to her, and she still has the knife in her hand and she's covered with blood. But instead of putting the knife to her throat or killing herself, she like pulls out a cell phone and admits, 911, I killed somebody, and then the scene ends. And I feel like that's like a bigger lesson too in this film. Like when violence does happen, and most likely you will be punished for it, should we, exit this world or should we, admit to it and then move on with lives? You get what I'm saying? So I thought that was interesting.
It was interesting. And it was also interesting, like, she was the only one who committed and confessed to murdering those guys. And she
Mm.
was the only woman. Because now that you said it, I'm also thinking, did she do that because she was a woman? Because, yeah, there is a different kind of, like, there might be a different kind of feeling towards violence
Hmm.
between men and women, especially if we're thinking about, like, a very traditional country like China, you
Yeah.
know?
Like she
So,
might get a lighter sentence.
yeah, that's also true. Like, yeah, she might say they were trying to rape me and stuff like that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's something to think about, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so moving on to the final story. So there's this guy called Zhao Hui, a Hunan native working at a textile factory, accidentally causes a workplace injury. Unwilling to work while his wages are transferred to the injured party as compensation, he flees employment and heads to Dongguan, where he finds work at a hostess club. There, he strikes a chord with Lian Rong, a hostess and another Hunan native. Over time, Zhao Hui and Lian Rong grow close, but Lian Rong rejects Zhao Hui's romantic advances and his proposal that they leave Dongguan. She reveals that she has a daughter and is only doing sex work in order to provide for her. Zhao Hui witnesses Lian Rong performing sexual services on a client one night and quits. Zhao Hui takes on a job he earlier rejected for unfavorable benefits. Penniless until his next payday, he receives a call from his mother who berates him for not sending money home. He is then caught by Chang Ling, the injured party from the textile factory. Chang and his gang prepare to beat Zhao Hui up for escaping work, but relent and leave. Humiliated, Zhao Hui commits suicide by jumping out of his company apartment unit. This segment is based on the spate of worker suicides in locations and facilities owned by Foxconn between 2010 and 2013. What did you think of this story?
Oh God, yeah. This story was also, it was a different perspective because it was the perspective of the young people. This
Mm-hmm.
guy is what, like 20 or something, maybe 25 the most.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like these are the times where we can discover ourselves, where we can find what we're passionate about. But the conditions of the world can be so harsh that we wouldn't even have time for to think of anything related to that.
Mm-hmm.
We're just like rushing through life trying to survive once again. And also like the fact that he had to pay for this injury was crazy because I'm thinking, doesn't like the factory need to pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that because they should have, I don't know, gloves or something to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, like the working conditions in the factory, they show different scenes and stuff. It was like kind of, yeah, like very I don't know, harsh
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I couldn't, like, it felt like a, I don't know, like just a hypnotizing place. Like
Yeah.
all these sounds of the machines and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. It like makes you a plant. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And yeah, what did you think about that part?
What I liked about this part is that it shows you a bit more glamorous side of China and like maybe like more beautiful people because up to this point everybody up in the film looked grimy, kind of broken down, dirty, dusted, disgusted. But this part shows youthful people with like beautiful faces and like great energy and stuff like that. So I like that transition too. And I have to say this movie does a good job of showing like so many different parts of China because in this part of the movie they go to the Cantonese section of China, right? And this is a different part where they speak like a different version of Chinese and stuff like that. And there's so much cultural stuff in this movie that I just like seeing, like learning about. You get what I'm saying? And yeah, I think the most important scene for me in this film, and I think the most important scene in the entire film, is when Chang meets Leon Rong again, and he has the rod and he's about to hit him, but he lets it drop, and he walks away. And I think that is possibly the illest like part of this film because it shows that violence is not inevitable. We can reject violence. We can reject revenge. We don't have to constantly try to fight back against those who do us wrong. We can let go. And maybe that's the right thing. Because maybe Chang saw in Leon wrong. Hey, that's me too. He's poor. He's young. let me not ruin his life like he did my thumb. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was an important message, definitely.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, it still didn't, like, I'm not trying to say, like, what he did was not enough or anything like that. That was definitely, like, a stand up move.
Mhm.
But at the end, like, it showed another type of violence, and that was, like, suicide, harming yourself,
Right.
which is also violence. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes, like, even if other people don't, like, harm us, we can harm ourselves because the conditions are so, once again, like, prisoning you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think the suicide scene when he does jump from the building, it's so sort of anticlimactic. It wasn't like there was this build up to it, or it just sort of happens. Like he gets up from the bed, walks to the edge, and just jumps and does it. You know what I mean? And I think maybe they wanted to show like this sort of violence can be impulsive. Like suicide can be based on a feeling of having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month or a bad year, right? And this sort of stuff can happen way too often in this society, like how they painted in China, where everything is a bit mechanical. And no matter what you want to do, there's no way up. You want to love? Sorry, your girl is a sex worker and she's only in it for the money. And she'll suck the richest man's dick, literally, right? You want to rise up in the factory? Sorry, you got to pay your next year's wages to the guy you hurt because you were having small talk. Like it can feel like so constricting that you can't move forward. So just end it right now. Just do it. Jump, right? And I thought that was interesting. I thought that last film was very interesting.
Yeah. And I also like the girl in this story as well because, like, she reveals that she has a daughter, right? We don't
Yeah.
know how she ended up having a daughter. Was it because, she's a sex worker and then she got pregnant by accident and, she didn't want to abort it. So, like, she ended up having a daughter. And also, like, how at the same time she was always, like, joking around, and kind of happy and things like that. It kind of showed another part where, like, okay, so because you're young and stuff, you're kind of like, find the joys of this life. You know what I mean? Like she's
Mhm.
still on Instagram and stuff like that. Like she was finding joys in her life, even though she was a sex worker.
Mhm.
And I also thought it was interesting that one of like the sex workers' performance was the Chinese army military costume.
Mhm.
Because like, why would you have that? You know what I mean?
Right. Right. That part of the film when like, the people, the rich guys come to the club and the prostitutes come out marching in different sorts of outfits. Sometimes they're dressed like geishas, sometimes like, Chinese army soldiers, stuff like that. This movie does a good job of showing like the upper class in China is very perverse, very weird, because they do a lot of weird stuff throughout this movie.
Yeah, definitely. But it was like a different take, different story, and I really like this one as well.
Yeah. I don't think there were any animals in this part of the film though. The only thing I
Mm.
remember in this part of the film is that there were black people there. So is the director trying to say, oh, the black people are the animals? Compare them to look how happy they are to
Wow.
the sad Chinese.
No, no, come on. I mean, I think like there were black people there because the city that this story was in was like a factory city, right?
Hmm.
So maybe that's why those are like the tourist workers, or I don't know what they're called, but like the
Temporary
immigrant
workers.
workers.
Yeah.
Like those people usually go to the factories and stuff like that, you know?
Right. Well, there's also a lot of students in China and also people doing business in China, mostly in Guangzhou, which is in the south.
Okay. I mean, I don't know it that well, so
Yeah.
I just
But
assumed that that was why.
yeah, no, I think there's a good amount of Africans in China, but they're like sort of concentrated in like a few cities, mostly in the south, where there's trading and business and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
very this part was interesting. That part was definitely interesting. Not much more to say. So let's go to the end of the film. So at the end of the story, back in Shanxi, the first city where everything happened with Dahai and everything, Zhao Yu attends an interview at a factory now under the management of Mrs. Jiao. So Zhao Yu was the girl in the third story, basically, the girl who killed the two guys who tried to rape her, but then she calls the police and confesses. And Mrs. Jiao was the wife of the guy who sold the coal mine that Dahai killed at the beginning of the story. So she chances across a public opera performance where an opera actor asks, "Do you understand your sin?" ostensibly to the crowd. Okay, that's a bad description of the ending because Zhao Yu goes to the city, and obviously she must have did some time in jail because Miss Jiao asked her, "Is that trouble behind you?" And they look at each other and they have an understanding, and they both see that now they're ready to move forward with their lives. Miss Jiao lost her husband, and Zhao Yu probably lost years of her life or something like that. And the question about asking, "Do you know your sin?" I thought that was very interesting how to end the movie, right? Because violence, murder, death is always a sin. It's always a sin to take lives. And putting that on Zhao Yu's story, that might be an interesting way to frame this film, right? But I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it's a very, yeah, I do also think it's an interesting question because do you understand your sin is like not that simple of a question in my
Mm,
opinion when in terms of this movie because it's like understanding your whole like the whole history and pathology of your sin,
mhm,
like why you committed and who made you commit it or did you commit it or what were the factors and stuff like that. I feel like it's like a holistic question if that
right.
makes sense. And yeah, like do we understand their sin in this movie? I'm asking myself, like, yeah, their sin was like harming other people, right? Or
Hmm.
harming themselves.
Hmm.
But we sort of all justified their sins in our heads as we watched for most of them. Maybe not
Right.
in Sinir, but for the other ones, we sort of like understood them. But also, like, what does knowing your sin prove as
Hmm.
well? You
Hmm.
know,
Right.
what difference does it make? I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, all of the characters in the story have a sin. Dai Hai is secretly envious and jealous of the rich guys he grew up, of the guys who became rich that he grew up with. I mean, Sanera is just a murderer. I mean, he's just a demon. Zhao Yu was cheating. Well, she was sleeping with a married man. And the final guy, his sin was he ran away from responsibility. So all of them do have sin, right? And somehow violence comes into their story of sin as well. So understanding it takes some time because we can always try to justify a reason why they killed somebody or did something. But is the sin in and of itself justifying murder, justifying violence, right? Some of them can be defended, like defending yourself from a rapist. But is, I don't know, shooting a woman in the back of the head because you need money because you can't get a job anywhere else, is that justifiable? No. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we could like sit here and talk 2 more hours about this movie. I feel like because there's like insane amount to uncover uh, with the system and with when it comes to crime and sin and what is right or what is wrong, what is justifiable, and how does the system and capitalism affect us and all of those things. And there's a lot to unpack here. But I really like this movie. The more that we talk about it, definitely.
Definitely, definitely. So, last thing we'll talk about a scene you really liked that maybe we didn't discuss or something that's come to mind. One thing I want to say, I forgot to mention the scene, and I thought it was so cool. After Sanar kills the woman and he leaves the town, he's on his motorcycle and he sees a truck pulling a bunch of cattle. And the cattle are like looking at him, like, very sad, while he's on the highway and stuff like that. And I thought the cattle was interesting because, like, Saner is this person who sort of lives his own life and decides what his fate will be. Meanwhile, the cattle can sort of symbolize how people are like trapped in a box and they're sort of being pulled by the people in power, right? Like everybody else at Daihai's factory or the workers at the spa or the hotels and stuff like that. But Saner is sort of making his own way in life. And yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Cool scene for me.
Yeah, it is cool. Maybe it's like the sheep metaphor,
Hmm.
but maybe in China they say like, cattle's, not sheep.
Yeah,
But I don't know. Yeah, that's definitely interesting because Sanir is like the only person who's not trying to really survive. And he's sort of, I mean, of course, everyone is surviving, but Sanir is like you said, he's making his own rules
yeah,
while
definitely.
other people are struggling with the system and their lives.
Yep.
Okay,
Uh,
so,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, what do you rate this movie?
I really like it. I give it. It's just a bit slow at times, but I could really watch this movie again and again and again. And I really don't watch movies like that often, so I'm gonna give it a 9. Honestly.
Okay. Yeah, it's really good. Like I said, the more I talk about it, I feel like there's more to unwrap. And I could probably talk about this like for 5, 6 hours.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it an 8. Just because yeah, like the music for me was missing, and it can be hard for an international like a person who's not Chinese to understand some things
Hmm.
in this movie, but that doesn't take away from like the story itself.
Hmm.
And at times when I was watching it, I did get a bit like not bored, but a bit bored.
I'm not bored, but a bit bored. I know what you mean. Like I said, there are parts where the dialogue moves a bit slow. It didn't
Yeah,
have to have so many pauses.
yeah, so those are like my 2 points, so I
Yeah.
give it an 8.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this has been episode 39 of Simon and Acting Movie Reviews. Check out Cinema Crossroads. Tune in on my YouTube channel, Simon Hill Keeps It Trill. Send movie suggestions if you have anything you think we should watch. And peace.